So the long-awaited NASA report on UAPs came and went without much media coverage. And that's probably because it was mainly a list of recommendations for how NASA could bring some much needed credibility to the topic of UFOs. And we'll get into some of those recommendations in this video, but also NASA kind of just casually, possibly debunks one of the more famous UAP encounters ever caught on camera. But before I get into the aspect of this report that probably should have been bigger news, I just have to clarify up front that NASA did not have access to classified information for the purposes of this report. So it was never actually intended to be a definitive statement on whether or not UAPs, UFOs are a real phenomenon. But there are a couple of interesting things in this report that I wanted to bring to your attention, specifically some of the things that NASA is getting right with this effort, and maybe some of the areas where they've probably already made some mistakes. So right at the beginning of the report, they detail how this UAP independent study team is going to operate. It's composed of 16 experts from diverse backgrounds in science, technology, data, artificial intelligence, space exploration, aerospace safety, media, and commercial innovation. They also note specifically this report is not a review of previous UAP incidents. So first impressions right off the bat, a review of 16 professionals from a diverse scientific background is exactly what you want to see for efforts like this that are going to be taken seriously. NASA is appointing a director of UAP research to centralize communications and leverage NASA's extensive resources and expertise to actively engage in the whole of government UAP initiative. This individual will also ensure that the agency's vast analytical capabilities, including its proficiency in data management, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, are contributed to the government's unified UAP effort. All right, now here's where NASA starts making their first mistake. At NASA, we are committed to openness, transparency, and scientific integrity, and they are a central part of our operations. However, the release of this report actually got a little bit of media coverage because they didn't stick to that very statement. They weren't actually committed to openness and transparency by disclosing everybody involved in this effort, specifically who the director was. In a briefing on Thursday held to discuss the first public report of its independent UAP study team, NASA leaders initially stated that they would not be naming the director publicly. It's unclear why the agency reversed that decision, but comments made during the briefing suggested that members of NASA's UAP study group had received threats and harassment online. That's in part why we are not splashing the name of our new director out there, because science needs to be free, science needs to undergo a real and rigorous and rational process, and you need the freedom of thought to be able to do that. Some of the threats and the harassment have been beyond the pale, quite frankly, towards some of our panelists, and yes, it's important that science be free as part of that process. Okay, so not off to a great start on the transparency front, but I actually don't have any problems believing that some of these people did receive threatening emails and death threats. For better or worse, the UFO community has some very dedicated followers who are not afraid of speaking their minds. But whoever took that job should have known that going in, knowing that they were going to receive an onslaught from people online. And there's also an important point here that I think we have to recognize. The heat wouldn't just be coming from the UFO community. They even mentioned it in the written report that a lot of these scientists were warned by other scientists not to be a part of this task force because they wouldn't be taken seriously by the rest of the scientific community. NASA's public announcement of its UAP independent study team membership was met with interest and spurred both positive and negative feedback. At least one scientist serving on the study team reported receiving negative hate mail from colleagues due to their membership. Others were ridiculed and criticized on social media. Study team members also noted firsthand knowledge of colleagues who were warned to stay away from research in areas like extraterrestrial technosignatures, which could damage their scientific credibility and promotion potential. These experiences further confirm the negative stigma associated with studying unusual or unexplained phenomena. Such criticism, either by detractors or by proponents of the extraterrestrial hypothesis, are anathema to the scientific method, which NASA always has and will continue to promote in an objective and open-minded fashion. All right, so here NASA is actually standing up for the fact that studying UFOs and extraterrestrial life should not be taboo to the scientific community, which I respect, but at the same time, I do find it somewhat interesting that the one person on this study team that they feel the need to protect the anonymity of, his previous job was as NASA's liaison to the Department of Defense. And I'm not saying there's a conspiracy there, but when you start getting shy about disclosing some of the people tied to the intelligence community associated with your task force, it does tend to breed conspiracy theories. All right, so now let's get into the juicy stuff, the reason you clicked on this video. Viewers of this channel are probably very familiar already with the Go Fast UFO video. Now, the Go Fast UFO was captured on video by a Navy fighter jet, and the video was subsequently leaked to the public back in 2018 and has since been splashed all over the internet as evidence of alien life. But the interesting part here is that just buried in the middle of this report, NASA makes actually a pretty compelling case for why this probably isn't a UFO at all. A well-known UAP event is the Go Fast video recorded by Navy aviators from the USS Theodore Roosevelt. A still frame from this video is shown in the figure below right here, where the infrared camera has locked onto a small object in the center. The video gives an impression of an object skimming above the ocean at a great velocity, but analysis of the numerical information on the display reveals a less extraordinary interpretation. So what they've done is they've taken the instrument data that was on that Go Fast video and done some basic trigonometry and determined that maybe it wasn't moving quite as fast as they thought it was. The circled numbers in the image provide the information needed to estimate the object's altitude and velocity. Information like elevation angle of the camera, azimuth angle of the camera, target range, time reference in seconds, and indicated airspeed in knots. Using items 1, 3, and 4, circled over here on this diagram, plus a bit of trigonometry, we calculate that the object is at an altitude of 13,000 feet and 4.2 miles from the ocean behind it. Given that the aircraft's ground speed is about 435 miles per hour, we may conclude that the impression of rapid motion is at least partly due to the high velocity of the sensor, coupled with the parallax effect. Okay, so if we take a look again at the Go Fast video, you can see early on when they're trying to get a lock on this thing, it doesn't actually appear like it's really moving all that fast over the ocean. But then once they do get a lock, it looks like it's zooming along. But what this document is saying is that it's the aircraft that's moving at over 400 miles per hour getting a lock on this object that makes it appear as if it's zooming over the ocean. We can use other information from the display to place some limits on the true velocity of the object. This analysis is summarized in the right-hand panel here, which depicts an overhead view of the encounter during a 22-second interval. The jet was banking left at about 15 degrees during this time, which corresponds to an approximate turning radius of 16 kilometers. We know the range and bearing of the object at the start over this 22-second time frame. Using the calculated true airspeed and a bit more trigonometry, we find the object moved about 390 meters during this 22-second interval, which corresponds to an average speed of only 40 miles per hour. This is a typical wind speed at an altitude of 13,000 feet. So again, what they're saying here, this object was only moving at about 40 miles per hour. So the conclusion is that whatever that object was that was filmed in the Go Fast video, whether it was a weather balloon, some other type of balloon, or just something that happened to get caught on a wind current, most likely it was just drifting along at the wind speed. But there is one thing in here that I don't necessarily agree with their analysis. Note also that the object appears bright against the dark ocean for these display settings. This indicates that the object is colder than the ocean. There is thus no evidence of heat produced by a propulsion system. This further supports the conjecture that the object is most likely drifting with the wind. The availability of additional data would enable a more firm conclusion about the nature of this object. Now, if we take Bob Lazar's testimony at face value, which a lot of people aren't necessarily willing to do, but just for the sake of this argument, if we take Bob Lazar's testimony at face value, that these aircraft operated by extraterrestrials are not using a typical internal combustion engine, but rather some sort of gravity manipulation technology, there would be no heat signature from a technology like that. And so while I do believe this is a pretty valid scientific analysis of the Go Fast video itself, one of the questions I would have if we were going to take this one step further and really get to the bottom of what happened here is I would want to interview the pilots and ask them what was happening with that object that triggered your desire to get a lock on it in the first place. Was it moving in some sort of different pattern? Was it moving faster and stopping and changing direction? Or was it just something you saw floating in the wind and you decided to test your sensors to see if you can get a lock? The intent behind why they captured that video in the first place would be a pretty important data point. And on that note of collecting more data, there's one last thing in this video I'd like to draw your attention to where I think NASA is getting it right. In addition, much of the data collected by military sensors or intelligence satellites are classified. Keep in mind, NASA did not have access to classified information for the purposes of this report, often because of what the imagery could reveal about US technical capabilities to our adversaries, and not because of what is actually in the images. While essential for security, these classified observations enhance the sense of mystery and conspiracy surrounding UAP, and they present an obstacle to scientific inquiry. For many events, the data and metadata did not enable a conclusive characterization of the size, motion, or nature of the UAP. Yet where it did, such as in the Go Fast UAP video, the apparent anomalous behavior of the UAP can often be explained by the motion of the sensor platform. And essentially what they're saying here is that just the mere secrecy through this overuse of the classification process itself adds more mystery to the UAP phenomenon than even needs to be there. Because I think even most people in the UFO community can agree most of the things that we capture on camera aren't actually UFOs or aliens or anything like that. It's just stuff that people get on camera and they don't actually know how to explain it. In science, data need to be reproducible and hypotheses falsifiable. The scientific method works by systematically analyzing data with the intent to falsify a hypothesis. And as a scientist, I love reading that because it tells me NASA is doing good science. When you are open to the possibility, and not just open to the possibility, you are directly trying to prove that the assumptions that you had in the first place are incorrect. That tells me you are willing to pursue the truth, regardless of what you actually find or what your preconceived notions of the truth were. Because in science, we're always looking for new data to upset everything that we know, or at least the good scientists. And unfortunately, so many people in scientific communities have this adherence to dogma that they already know what the truth is and aren't as open to the scientific method and uncovering new data as perhaps they should be. But I would love to know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you think the media buried the lead on this one? Or do you think NASA just kind of buried this debunking in the report itself as sort of a taste of things to come? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, please do so. And I will catch you guys on the next one.